Kai had been married to Vesper for only 3 months, and he was still navigating the labyrinthine customs of her family. The Kale dynasty owned vast estates across 3 planetary systems, but their primary residence was the Crystalline Spire, a mansion carved into the heart of an asteroid, its corridors stretching for kilometers through bioluminescent stone. "Explore as you wish, my love," Vesper had said that morning, her iridescent skin shimmering with affection as she kissed him softly before attending her family's council meeting. "Though avoid the eastern wing. That's restricted." Naturally, he'd made his way there within the hour. The eastern wing was exactly as forbidden things tend to be, fascinating. Display cases lined the corridors, each containing artifacts that seemed to defy explanation. Crystal orbs containing swirling galaxies. Weapons that hummed with dormant energy. And then there was the device. It sat alone on a pedestal in a small alcove, glowing with a soft, pulsing light, violet fading to blue to violet again. Kai had always been drawn to beautiful things, and this was undeniably beautiful. It was roughly the size of his fist, shaped like an interlocking geometric puzzle with surfaces that reflected light impossibly. His fingers reached out almost of their own accord. The moment his skin made contact, an alarm screamed through the mansion, not a loud alarm, but a crystalline chiming that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his bones. He dropped the device onto the pedestal like it had burned him, but the chiming continued. Then came the scream. "Not that one. That's my sister's." Vesper's form filled the alcove's entrance, her usual composed elegance shattered. Her eyes, normally a warm amber, blazed with crimson fury. Her hair, which had been meticulously braided with silver threads, stood on end as if charged with electricity. She wore her formal house robes, deep purple silk that rippled around her like liquid shadow, and she looked absolutely terrifying. Kai's stomach dropped. "I can explain." "You can explain why you're in a restricted area touching artifacts that don't belong to you?" She strode forward, and he instinctively backed away. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He did not. His only certainty was that whatever he'd done, it was very, very bad. Vesper grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her fingers warm against his skin. She pulled him away from the alcove, practically dragging him down the corridor toward her private chambers. The iridescence of her skin deepened with emotion, a trait he'd come to recognize as indicating either passion or profound anger. Right now, it was impossible to tell which. "Do you understand anything about Kale family law?" she demanded, releasing him once they were safely behind her sealed doors. "Did you ask anyone about this before you decided to explore?" "You said explore as I wish," he countered, though he knew it was a weak defense. "I said avoid the eastern wing." She turned away from him, her shoulders rigid. "That wing contains the family sanctum. Each artifact is bonded to a specific bloodline member. Touching someone else's bonded artifact triggers a harmonic resonance with our ancestral defenses. If you had held it longer, the mansion's security would have sealed the entire wing and..." She paused, her voice dropping. "It could have been catastrophic." Kai moved toward her. "Then help me fix it." She whirled around, and he saw it then. Beneath the anger, there was fear. Real, genuine fear. Her eyes had shifted to a deep violet, and small luminescent patterns flickered across her temples like a living map of her distress. Without thinking, he crossed the distance between them and pulled her close. She stiffened initially, but then collapsed against him, her forehead resting on his shoulder. He could feel her racing heartbeat through her thin robes. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "You should have asked," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. She lifted her head, and he saw tears reflecting the ambient light of the chamber. "My sister Kenna doesn't tolerate mistakes well. That artifact, it's a resonance stone. It contains a fragment of our ancestors' consciousness. If you'd triggered a full harmonic cascade, you could have released something that would..." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "That would what?" he prompted. Destroyed half the mansion, possibly killed us both, and definitely started a family war that would echo across 3 systems, she finished flatly. Then she grabbed his hand. We need to go to the archives. We need to find out if the cascade has begun, and if so, what we can do to seal it before Kenna returns from her expedition to Kepler 452. How long until she returns? Vesper's expression was grim. 3 hours. She pulled him toward the door, then paused. Her hand lingered in his, and despite the crisis, she leaned up to kiss him quickly, tenderly. No more exploring without me, she murmured against his lips. Promise me. I promise, he breathed. The archives were deeper than Kai had imagined, carved into the asteroid's core where the bioluminescent stones pulsed with a different quality of light, slower, older, somehow sadder. Vesper led him through narrow passages, her hand still gripping his as if afraid he'd wander off again. The temperature dropped as they descended, and the air grew thick with something that felt almost ceremonial. The walls hummed softly, and occasionally he caught glimpses of what appeared to be data crystallized into physical form, entire histories recorded in mineral matrices, knowledge preserved in stone for millennia. They passed through several security gates that responded only to Vesper's touch, each one sealing behind them with an ominous hiss of finality. Kai understood that they were moving into places few humans had ever been. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on him almost physically. There, Vesper said finally, pointing to a nexus point where multiple crystal formations converged in an intricate lattice. The chamber they entered was vast, with data projections floating in the air like holographic constellations. She placed her palm against one of the larger structures, and it bloomed with soft light, projecting holographic data into the air around them. The images were complex, waveforms, energy signatures, harmonic patterns that pulsed and shifted. The resonance stone's harmonic signature. We need to see if a cascade has initiated. As they examined the displays, Kai noticed something he'd never seen before. When Vesper concentrated, her skin rippled with patterns that seemed to sync with the data, as if she were literally reading the information through her very being. The patterns flowed across her skin like living tattoos, creating a symphony of light and color. It was beautiful and strange and impossibly intimate, like watching her soul manifest itself visually. He stepped closer, unable to help himself. As she worked, he traced one finger along her arm, following the light patterns as they danced across her iridescent skin. She didn't pull away, and he felt her breath catch slightly. Not yet, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, her shoulders sagging with relief. The patterns on her skin began to fade, returning to her normal subtle iridescence. The cascade hasn't fully initiated. Whoever triggered it, and we both know it was you, the contact duration was brief enough that we have maybe an hour before the harmonic resonance reaches critical threshold. Can you reverse it? Kai asked, his arms settling around her waist. No. Her eyes met his, and they were serious again, though their depths held a tenderness that made his chest ache. But Kenna can, if we can convince her that it was a genuine accident. If she thinks it was intentional or careless. Vesper didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Kai pulled her close again, backing her gently against one of the crystalline walls. Her back pressed against the cool stone, and he framed her face with his hands. Her skin was warm, almost fevered with anxiety, and he could feel her pulse racing beneath her jawline. Tell me what to do, he said. I'll do anything. Vesper's eyes softened, glistening with unshed tears. You'll need to be honest, she whispered. And humble. Kenna respects honesty above all else. She won't respect excuses or deflections. We've been married for 3 months, and she's already twice as suspicious of you as she was before. This mistake. She trailed off, and he saw fear flash across her features again. I'll tell her the truth, Kai interrupted. He cupped her face gently and kissed her, slowly and deeply. He wanted her to know that he meant this, that he was serious. The kiss was tender, reverential, an apology and a promise all at once. Her response was immediate and passionate, her fingers fisting in his shirt as she pulled him closer. When they finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I won't let you down again." "You haven't let me down," she said softly. "You made a mistake. That's human." She smiled sadly. "It's just that our mistakes can be more explosive." They stood there in the archives, surrounded by the crystallized history of an alien dynasty, holding each other as if they could make the coming confrontation disappear through sheer force of will. Vesper's fingers traced patterns on his back through his shirt, and Kai buried his face in her hair, breathing in her scent, trying to memorize the feel of her in his arms. He had the terrible feeling this might be the last peaceful moment they had for some time. After several minutes, she pulled back reluctantly. "We should return to the main chambers. She'll be arriving soon." Kenna materialized in the Eastern Wing's main chamber exactly 37 minutes later, via a quantum displacement that made the air shimmer and crackle with visible energy. Kai had never met her in person before, only seen her in holographic communications transmitted across star systems. In person, the resemblance to Vesper was striking and unsettling, same elegant features, same bone structure, same capacity for luminescence. But where Vesper's bearing was graceful and warm, Kenna's was militant and cold. She wore armor that seemed to be woven from solidified starlight itself, armor that shifted between silver and deep blue as she moved. Her eyes were a cold, crystalline blue that suggested she'd seen things that had burned away any capacity for unnecessary sentiment or weakness. She carried herself like a soldier who'd fought in 1,000 wars and won every single one. "There's a harmonic cascade in my resonance stone," Kenna said flatly, not bothering with greetings or pleasantries. Her gaze fixed on Kai with the intensity of a targeting system zeroing in on prey. "I felt it the moment I stepped foot on this estate through the family resonance network. The cascade is still building. In approximately 45 minutes, it will reach critical threshold. I'm assuming this is your doing, husband of my sister?" Vesper stepped forward as if to shield him, but Kai gently placed a hand on her back and moved ahead of her himself. Cowardice now would compound his mistakes exponentially. "Yes," he said clearly, meeting Kenna's crystalline gaze without flinching. "It was entirely my fault. I was exploring areas I shouldn't have been in, I didn't ask permission, and I made contact with your resonance stone. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know the protocols. I didn't know that touching it would trigger an alarm or a cascade. Those are failures of my understanding and my judgment, not of anyone else. No one told me not to. I made an assumption, and I was catastrophically wrong." Kenna's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Kai was absolutely certain he was about to die. He had no idea what death at the hands of an alien noblewoman might entail, but he suspected it would be both efficient and unpleasant. Then she glanced at Vesper, who stepped close enough that their shoulders touched, a gesture of solidarity that didn't escape Kenna's notice. "You touched the stone knowingly, with intent to cause harm?" Kenna asked, her voice cutting like a blade of ice. "No, You touched it intentionally to provoke a family crisis or test our security measures?" "Of course not." "Then it was an accident born of ignorance rather than malice." Kenna's shoulders seemed to relax fractionally, though she still looked like she could kill someone with her pinky finger if she chose to. "How long was contact maintained?" "Be precise." "Seconds." "No more than 3 or 4 seconds at most," Kai answered immediately. "The moment I realized something was wrong, I dropped it." Vesper added, "He didn't know. He had no context for understanding what he'd done." Kenna was quiet for a long moment, studying Kai with an intensity that felt like she was reading his very DNA. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that showed teeth and made Kai understand this was a woman who'd survived encounters that would have destroyed lesser beings. "You're actually standing here, taking full responsibility instead of making excuses or hiding behind my sister's title or authority." Do you have any idea how rare that is among the courtiers of House Kale? Most would be weeping and blaming, fabricating stories about how they were lured into the restricted area or didn't see warning signs. I was taught that taking responsibility is better than making excuses, Kai said. I don't know if that applies to Kale culture, but I don't know how else to be. It does apply, Kenna said, and her smile became something almost warm. You've just passed the first test without knowing you were taking it. She moved toward the alcove where the resonance stone still rested on its pedestal, its light now pulsing rapidly, urgently. As she approached, the stone's light intensified further, responding to her presence like a beacon recognizing its master. She placed her hand on it, and the chiming that had alarmed Kai earlier returned, but now it resolved itself into something else. A harmony. A pattern that made sense, like a symphony suddenly coming into focus. Her entire body seemed to glow as she worked, and Kai watched in fascination as harmonic patterns rippled across her armor and skin. After a long moment that felt like an eternity, the light stabilized, and the chiming faded into a gentle harmonic hum that gradually disappeared entirely. The cascade is sealed. It'll take about 48 hours to fully dissipate, but there will be no permanent damage to the sanctum or the family network. Kai felt his knees nearly give out from relief. The week that followed was simultaneously the most challenging and the most rewarding of Kai's life. Kenna proved to be an exacting teacher, one who seemed to believe that information should be driven into the brain through sheer force of repetition and consequence. She dragged him through centuries of Kale family history, made him memorize the provenance and properties of hundreds of artifacts, and quizzed him relentlessly on protocol and procedure at all hours of the day and night. She woke him at dawn for history lessons and kept him until late evening studying harmonic resonance theory. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and occasionally infuriating. But by the fourth day, Kai found himself genuinely fascinated by the depth and complexity of Vesper's family heritage. Kenna herself was a fascinating teacher once you got past the terrifying exterior. She was brilliant, knowledgeable, and had a dry sense of humor that caught Kai off guard several times. By the third day, he realized she wasn't trying to punish him, she was trying to save his life by making sure he never made this kind of mistake again. But the real gift came in the evenings, when he would escape from Kenna's intense tutelage. Each night, Kai would return to Vesper's chambers, physically drained and mentally overwhelmed, his head swimming with information about harmonic frequencies and family lineage. She would have prepared a bath infused with minerals that soothed his aching muscles, minerals that shimmered with faint bioluminescence. The bathing chamber was one of Kai's favorite places, the walls embedded with luminescent stones that created a gentle glow, the water infused with warmth and something that smelled like starlight and flowers. She would join him in the steaming water without hesitation, her skin luminescent in the soft light. One evening, as they lay intertwined in the warm water, her back against his chest, she traced patterns across his forearm with one delicate finger. I was terrified that first day, she admitted softly, her voice barely audible in the quietness of the bathing chamber. When Kenna arrived, I thought she might enforce the old laws. Banishment, at minimum. Annulment of our marriage at worst. I was terrified I'd lose you. But she didn't, Kai murmured, catching her hand and holding it against his heart. He could feel his heartbeat beneath his skin, steady and alive. Because you told the truth. Because you took responsibility. Because you didn't try to deflect or minimize what happened. Because you chose honor instead of self-preservation, Vesper finished. She turned in his arms, water cascading over them both, and kissed him slowly. Do you know that most beings in the galaxy, when facing consequences, default to self-protection? They lie, they deflect, they blame others. It's instinctive. But you. She kissed him again, deeper this time. You chose honor instead. You chose to protect me by taking full responsibility. I chose you, he corrected, moving his hands along the smooth, warm curve of her back, feeling the faint bioluminescent patterns that rippled across her skin at his touch. I chose not to make things worse for you. She smiled, and the luminescent patterns across her skin brightened, creating a living constellation across her shoulders and arms. Same thing in my world. They made love that night in the warm water, unhurried and tender, their bodies fitting together as if designed specifically for each other. Kai learned the topology of her body, the places where she was most sensitive, the way her luminescence brightened when she was aroused, the sound she made when he touched the inside of her wrist. Vesper learned the way his body responded to her touch, the way he watched her face with such tender affection that it made her heart ache. Afterward, they lay in bed, tangled together, her head resting on his chest. They didn't need to speak. The comfortable silence said everything. On the final day of his instruction, Kenna took him to a place he hadn't been before, a chamber deep in the core of the asteroid where the oldest artifacts were kept, sealed behind barriers of crystalline light that only responded to specific bloodline signatures. The barriers were intimidating, rippling with energy that made Kai's skin tingle just looking at them. "You've done well," Kenna said, which coming from her sounded almost effusive. "Better than I expected. Your wife chose well, even if it was partially accidental." She placed her hand on one of the barriers, and it dissolved like mist. "This is the true family sanctum. These are not tests. These are treasures, memories, and power accumulated over millennia. I'm showing you because I believe Vesper will eventually want to share these with you, and when she does, I want you to understand their weight. Their importance. What we're entrusting to you." Inside, the chamber was breathtaking. Artifacts floated in stasis fields, each one glowing.